And welcome to all of those of you who are joining us online for our special online event during Small Business Week in Canada. And it's great to have you here as we celebrate small businesses and what they mean to our communities right across the country. I'm Dan Rogers. I'm the Executive Director for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this session, and we have a number that are logging in now. We have a special guest speaker. Extremely pleased to have the President and CEO of BDC, the Bank of Canadian Entrepreneurs, Michael Denham, who has joined us from Montreal. We're pleased to have him with us, as well as a couple of special guests. Well-known entrepreneurs, Steve Harvey and Nikki Check. I'll more formally introduce them as we move through the first part of our introductions to get our session underway. I want to begin, though, by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Okanagan Sioux people, the traditional unceded territory. We thank them for their rich history and culture. Once we go through the opening remarks today and have brief introductions, we'll dive into some questions, and I'm assuming all of you are aware of how Slido or how Zoom works. So you can use the Q&A function or even the chat function to communicate with us if you have a question at any time, and I'll be monitoring that through today's session. And conscious we have Mr. Denham very busy. Michael, thanks for joining us. We'll go to about 12:45 with Q&As, and we'll get as deep as we can. Though we do promise if you do submit a question, we will also get back to you later. We'll record it here and capture it here and make sure we follow up. And if we need to reach out to our representatives from BDC, a number who have also, Michael, joined us online, so we'll follow up with that. Just a note also, we are recording today's session. It will be posted on the Chamber's YouTube channel a bit later today so others can review the discussion that we'll be undertaking. At this time, though, we want to jump right into it. So I'm going to turn things over to the past president from the Kelowna Chamber and one of the leads and an entrepreneur unto herself. With Kelowna Now and the Kelowna Now Media Group, Nikki Check. Nikki, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you, Michael, for joining us today. Michael Denham is President and CEO of BDC, the Bank of Canadian Entrepreneurs. He leads a team of 2,400 people across Canada who work every day to help entrepreneurs by providing the guidance and financial support they need to build resilient, growing businesses. A seasoned leader with more than 30 years of senior management experience. Mr. Denham held senior roles at McKinsey, Bombardier, Accenture, and Aqua Terra before joining BDC. He is a strong supporter and promoter of small and medium-sized businesses and the impact they are making to our economy and prosperity. Welcome, Michael.
Nikki, thank you, and Steve, Nikki, Dan, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks everyone for making time. This is Small Business Week, as was said, and for us this is a big deal. We actually started Small Business Week down in the Fraser Valley, almost 50 years ago, and over the course of this week, we organized or were part of literally hundreds of events across the company to celebrate entrepreneurs. And their resilience, their innovation, and how they collectively move all of us forward. So it's great to be here for this. I've got two colleagues with me. The folks afterwards want to follow up with a face from BDC, Ryan McLean and Steve North are here. And lastly, Nikki, one point, one of the last, I travel a lot in my job. I like to meet entrepreneurs across the country. And I think one of the last trips I was able to make before COVID affected us all was to Kelowna in January, and I had a bunch of client meetings, and one highlight was watching Kelowna play Kamloops at night. And maybe this happens all the time, but by the end of the game, there were, I think, 3 people per bench. There've been about kind of 15 expulsions, but I guess I love the rivalry as a hockey player between Kelowna and Kamloops. So I get a bit wistful about my trip to Kelowna because it takes me back to the pre-COVID days, but it is nice to be with you virtually. Thanks for the introduction.
Well, thanks, Michael. We're going to jump into it, and Steve and Nikki can share their perspectives as we move through some of the questions to get a better sense of what's happening here in the Okanagan, but also look at the pan-Canadian perspective. And when you make mention of junior hockey, we have a major franchise, and there is an example of a sector and industry that's been hard hit. We're looking forward to the Rockets, but I can't imagine. We were also set to host the Memorial Cup, and that was an impact on tourism and an ongoing impact, and the future of young, up-and-coming professionals, and many of them that we've seen in the past. If they don't make it in hockey because of their dedication to it, they move. We see that they move to business. So we'll maybe talk hockey a little deeper as to one of those areas that's been hit. So certainly we appreciate the Rockets are a member of us and they've been impacted. So let's start, Michael, with the pan-Canadian perspective. And obviously you work closely with small businesses, SMEs, right across the country, over 60,000 business owners that have been impacted. How would you describe the entrepreneur situation and the impact that it's had, that you've seen, what you've heard in Kelowna, and what you've seen the response has been across the country?
Yeah, and again, we do have a presence across the country, and as most of you would know, BDC are in the business of providing loans. We're also an equity investor. We're Canada's largest venture capital investor, and we provide consulting, advisory services, consulting advice to our clients. So we do have a pretty good sense of what's going on across the country. And you know what your experience in Kelowna is actually quite similar to what we're seeing elsewhere, in the sense that the overall economy is going to get back to kind of where it was, probably not until sometime in 2022, 2023. What you're finding, though, is there are some sectors like food manufacturing, like technology, like healthcare related activities that are actually, and construction in some places, that are back to the level almost above where they were in March. But there are many sectors like the ones you mentioned, tourism, aerospace, airline related segments, accommodation, et cetera, that are frankly well below where they were. And as this public health crisis kind of stays with us, it's frankly very unclear when they're going to get back to normal. And so the economy is kind of on two forks in the road. And in Kelowna, I think you're equally affected by both of the forks. So in many ways, the opportunities and challenges you see here are quite similar to what we're seeing in other regions and other metropolitan areas.
So I know BDC has done a study. I'm going to get to that, so we go a little deeper. But I want to bring Steve and Nikki in because I think it would be useful to spend just a moment or so to even go a little bit deeper of what we're seeing, what is shifting or occurring in consumer habits, use of technology, and whether that's short or long term, and what entrepreneurs need to be aware of, because I think that would be useful. We've got a good attendance here. We want to share what we're discussing today, even afterwards, with others. So Steve and Nikki, any general things that you're hearing in the marketplace with the entrepreneurs that you're dealing with, challenges or observations in those kind of general areas that you're seeing? Steve, do you want to start?
Sure. Yep. So, I mean, not much different than what Michael's saying. I mean, we're obviously seeing, with a lot of our travel entrepreneurs, that obviously business travel is way down, in-person handling of paper. Everyone's moving to the digital, just as we are doing today, online through Zoom. We haven't really seen the reduction in office space as of quite yet. We're fully aware of everyone's still working. A lot of people are still working from home, and a lot of companies have mandated that. We believe it's coming, and we think that that's going to move into 2021. Remote work, less business travel, less office demand. Unfortunately, we're seeing hotels, really struggling. Obviously, the airlines, tourism. We have a unique bubble in Kelowna, being that, we had a fairly strong summer for a lot of business owners. A lot of businesses did really well. Obviously, up into that, the March, April, May was really, really tough. The summer businesses kind of got back to normal. And now, they're very uncertain about what's happening here in the fall and into next year.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. And Nikki, your perspective, any general kind of themes that you're noticing in the small businesses and entrepreneurs that you're dealing with?
Certainly the cautiously optimistic from those that have made their way through this and are being careful of the potential of a second wave and what that means, but a lot of preparedness around not getting caught, not having plans in place to ensure that we can deal with a second wave, and then absolutely adoption or consideration of processes and automation and how to work remotely immediately effectively without delay.
Great, thanks for that. Michael, I'm going to come back to you from the perspective of hopefully this is kind of consistent. I wanted to kind of set the ground of what they were hearing, certainly consistent with what we're hearing at the chamber. And I think it would be helpful in the time we have, such that when those that have joined us or others, there's some good takeaways of this is what I need to think about in the short term, and this is what I need to do, because many of us, and we are almost like a small organization here, are planning for 2021, and then also, so what does 2022 look like? And I know your team recently undertook a pretty broad study looking at what entrepreneurs are doing to adapt to this new reality. Can you share some of the key findings from that report with us?
Sure, happy to. And it's something we do every year for small business. So we like to put some research out there to just represent some facts and some discussion points that folks can reflect on. And it is available on bdc.ca. So we surveyed over 1,000 entrepreneurs. So basically asked them, then to your question, looking ahead, what are your priorities? Very simple question. And there were 5 things that emerged from the survey. And they actually resonate, Nikki and Steve, with many of the points you just mentioned. So the 5 priorities are, firstly, entrepreneurs are saying there is a need to get their finances in order. It's always true, but there's been so much that we've all gone through since March. And a lot of entrepreneurs I know whose balance sheets, frankly, need some fixing. So getting their finances in order, understanding what their cash flows can look like and should look like for the months ahead, because there's a little bit more of a planning certainty, for better or worse, over the next number of months. So that's number 1. Number 2, as Nikki just said, there is a second priority is to invest in technology. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, having been forced to kind of shed a lot of their employees and workers, are going to bring them back, but they want to bring them back on the leanest possible base. So they're making investments, so they'll bring back the workers they need to execute their plans. But with this technology investments in place, it'll be leaner, and as a result, produce better margins once volumes come. The third priority is a recognition that teleworking is here to stay. And right now we're all working, or at least in Montreal anyway, we're all working kind of 5 days a week away from the office. It's not going to be like that indefinitely, but I think the reality is we've worked this way, we've seen the benefits, we know we can be productive. So in some way, shape, or form, depending on the company, this notion of telework is here to stay, and folks need to get ready for that. Fourth is selling online. And one thing that almost caused me to fall off my chair. You see a lot of facts in my role, and one was that over 50% of Canadians made their first online purchase since March, which is an unbelievable fact. And guess what? Each and every one of those people liked the experience. So Canada's always been a bit of a laggard in terms versus other developed countries in terms of our digital penetration, presence of e-commerce. And I think we're seeing ourselves catch up now very rapidly. So we all need to be prepared for that with a disproportionate shift of sales and revenue generating activities online. And then lastly, again, Nikki and Steve both mentioned this, is as certain sectors begin to have more certainty, there is a renewed focus on growth. And there are opportunities in terms of investing in buildings, equipment, R&D, international expansion, M&A. A lot of opportunities now are starting to present themselves. So a bit of a long answer, shorter than the actual document, but long answer with respect to the 5 priorities that we see entrepreneurs setting out to tackle across the country.
Yeah, I want to dig a little deeper in that, and Nikki and Steve, if anything prompts you, feel free to jump in. We want to have a fruitful conversation here. I want to come back, Michael, with respect to finances, if you could, because we are hearing from some that, okay, how do I plan my finances when I don't know what government programs might exist or whether I would qualify them? And also the other piece is, by the way, I don't need more loans because I'm concerned about long-term debt. So we're hearing that feedback. And also the other component is, and I know this doesn't always apply to BDC directly, but application-based that take a long time for particularly those really small micro businesses. Yeah, it sounds really good. Any guidance that you can give in long-term planning, or is it just hang in there and there'll be support around you and hopefully the government is clear? We're also in an election mode here and there's promises being made even provincially on this. So any guidance aside from trying to encourage people to be as patient as possible?
I'll just stick to the federal, which is the world that I know. And again, the way things unfolded is back in March, the first response the government made to help small business was to recapitalize both BDC and EDC, so that we would have the wherewithal to lend more. And we went about doing that. And we had this in the 2 weeks, last 2 weeks in March, we had more applications for loans than we typically get in a year. So we did our best to respond, but frankly, we were way slower than any of us wanted to be. We were way slower than our clients wanted us to be. And it was just hard to get that much volume processed in that short a period of time. So we've taken the measures, taken the steps, and now things are much back to normal service levels. So if you want a loan through our online financing platform, the whole process is basically kind of done in less than 48 hours. So we're quick again. But to answer your question, and what's happened since then is bit by bit, the government has pieced together a number of programs, CEBA, which you all know, the wage subsidy, the new rent relief program. And this is the primary response. And there's to all these, there's a fair amount of grants being given, which is important, especially for companies that are very hard hit. With CEBA, there's also a wrapper of interest-free loans. And these should be the first places that all SMEs go for support, because grants are obviously priority number one. Interest-free loans are also attractive. And then you can come to BDC and some of the banks for credit on top of that. Now, these programs have been renewed since they were introduced, and they're going to be in place now for the next couple of months. So there is some certainty. And again, we'll just, I guess, insofar as the economy will evolve, the government has shown its ability to respond. But at least there's a little bit of certainty now with these programs in place that, again, I encourage all entrepreneurs to kind of fully tap into. That's why they're there.
Michael, if I could, and maybe Nikki might want to share a bit of perspective. So if I'm hearing there was a mammoth amount of volume that came towards BDC at the start of this, now obviously everyone had to make adjustments along the way. Are you saying if people got frustrated early on, they maybe come back around and contact their local reps and see what BDC can provide assistance in?
Well, I would suggest that BDC for those that need credit. There's also a program that we're part of that's getting delivered through all the chartered banks and financial institutions, which is called the BCAP, the Business Credit Availability Program, where we're providing support for the banks to take more risk and lend more. So I'd encourage all entrepreneurs to talk to us, talk to the banks, and again, one of the provisos is the company needs to be creditworthy pre-COVID. And that's something we all look for. But the hope would be that if that's the case, either through BDC or the banks, for those that want credit, the credit would flow.
I think a number of months ago, we had representatives from the Canadian Chamber on this when we started shifting towards responding to COVID-19 and some of the things that were happening. I think one of the representatives from the Canadian Chamber said, get to know your accountant, get to know your banker extremely well, because that will be important. I think it's as true today as it was back then. So appreciate that. I do want to get a plug in for Canada United as well. And Michael or Nikki or Steve, maybe you can make a comment too, because one of the things we're philosophically from a chamber, we're about competition and we're about choice. But in the circumstances of supporting local, we want to, remind consumers that you can make a big difference even if you're online, to look for those Canadian options. And I'm not sure if that's a finding out. Certainly the trend that you're seeing is people are going more online. For local economies, we want that online to be also with the entrepreneurs. So are you seeing that, or is that an issue that needs to be resonated, or is that the efforts like Canada United that now has government support that will make a big difference for some of the local economies and some of the small entrepreneurs that we have?
Yeah, Nikki and Steve will have views too, but I certainly think that's the case. I think this is helping. I think the one tends to assume online with buying from far away, but I think a lot of these online options are now for us to buy locally, and you'll just see there's an evolution in supply chains as well, as companies want redundancy and local reliability to reorient their supply chains around local source of supply. So I think it's all goodness for Canadian SMEs, and we welcome the trend and the focus on this.
Nikki, very quickly, what are you getting a sense? Are people, when they're shifting to more online practices to respond to consumer demand, are they concerned that there might be leakage to some of those majors and some powerful forces, particularly out of the US, driving that?
Oh, absolutely. There's on e-commerce and online purchases, they're so late coming into this space that it's very challenging for them, and they're not sure how to navigate it. And they do have to figure it out very quickly. And then there's a whole nother set of complications and challenges around the Amazons and the big companies that they're competing against now. It's not local competition anymore.
I think I might have made a comment somewhere along the line in promoting Small Business Week that Jeff Bezos has enough money. We don't have to worry about Jeff. Let's think about supporting our local small businesses. So I wonder, Michael, if I could jump, and I encourage people, if you want to use the Q&A, get involved in the conversation. And I'm often reminded that, we live in, certainly I live in this space on an ongoing basis working with the Chamber. But people are focused on ensuring they are on their day-to-day activities. And the question, just where can you apply for small business grants comes up. And just reminding, Michael, any general comments? Obviously you have your programs. Where would you say for an entrepreneur, where to begin?
Well, I think, frankly, if you go to the government, go to the Government of Canada website, or on bdc.ca, we have a coronavirus section, which lays out all the granting and kind of interest-free lending that's being done. And my sense is that, and these programs, especially CEBA, the WAVE subsidy, the rent relief, have been so well communicated that most entrepreneurs are well aware of what they represent and where to go. And certainly accountants are highly informed on this topic. And then for those whose needs exceed these programs and do want to talk about credit, come visit us, bdc.ca, and we have a whole range of kind of working capital solutions and online solutions and advisory services that we can offer. But it's all pretty clearly laid out. I think as we get more and more into the dealing with this pandemic, the communications from all levels of government have improved, and I think it's becoming easier to become aware of and access these programs.
Yeah, and if we certainly have an initiative where we make that information available on our website, but if someone's tuning in, and thanks for the question, by the way, it's a good reminder. Many were responding just by working harder, and now they've got a bit of time. Can I work smarter? What do I have to do, and do I have to apply? So just call the Chamber, and we'll certainly point you in the right direction. I think your accountant comment is quite correct, and we got lots of good accountants that are part of the Chamber network. I wonder, Michael, if you could, you talk to many entrepreneurs right across the country. Are there any particular entrepreneur stories that show how businesses have been, and we use the word, and I'm not sure I can replace pivot because it's a good word, that have pivoted or shown innovation to continue to grow their businesses in the wake of this crisis?
Sure. So I can start. I know that Nikki and Steve will have good personal stories of what they've done with their businesses to over the past few months. So I'll start with a couple of stories that we're familiar with, and then Nikki and Steve, over to you. But one is there are three that we've been talking about locally, because they're literally got thousands of great stories. but one is the Bardier family vineyards that you all know. And again, the way they've been able to adapt to just the challenges of kind of restaurant dining and premises visits, and what they've done through kind of online sales of their rosé, of their Cabernet Franc, et cetera, was a very kind of quick response to what in effect became a real risk in terms of the volume shutting down. Cedar Shed, Canada, I think you probably know that company as well. That was a very interesting story whereby the pandemic hit, everything closed, revenues collapsed. But the leaders of this business had a little bit of foresight to see that if we're all in our kind of stuck in our homes and our cottages for a while, there's going to be a big surge in kind of do-it-yourself home improvements and home renovations. And rather than just fully hunker down, they got their costs way down. They made a safe environment. They actually started to spend a little bit more on marketing. And that was extremely wise, because it did catalyze all sorts of opportunities for them to actually grow their business through this DIY surge over the course of the past few months. And then the other one is Top Grade Tire Recycling, which again was again on top of its business. It saw the fact that it was going to be a challenge around having enough tire availability, used tire availability for the winter, because there are relatively few trade-ins, and they just took steps early to secure the inventory, and as a result now have the inventory for their clients, and are performing quite well in terms of revenue. So a bit of a theme in terms of kind of thinking ahead, seeing opportunities where others may not, or seeing those opportunities quickly, position these three businesses to, I don't want to say do well, but in the circumstances, they've really moved their businesses forward, and we think they should feel very satisfied about what they've accomplished since March.
Nikki or Steve, anybody, and you know, I hate to put one person on the spot or showcase one, but I think it's good to share stories that people could potentially identify with and say, yeah, maybe I should think about that, that come to mind of showing that innovation.
Michael, I do have one that's specifically around financing and absolutely understanding the enormous volumes that BDC would have seen as the government issued those recapitalization funds. But through experience as an entrepreneur, experiencing the pandemic and what we were facing as a business, and that uncertainty and that panic, I know reaching out to BDC just to see about those loans and what was available, there certainly were barriers to entry. It was really challenging as not a BDC client. So recognizing that you have thousands, tens of thousands of clients, those would have been your first that you would be assisting. It has BDC positioned itself for any advice BDC can give to local businesses in preparation for a second wave or downturns in an ability for a business to operate for things that we just don't know are coming yet?
Yeah, see, the advice would be, and again, it flows from the way I started the conversation around the economy, kind of the industry's headed in different directions. And for those industries, and you're in one, frankly, where there is an ability to kind of plan, there's some growth opportunities, et cetera, we would encourage folks to actively think about taking advantage of opportunities to grow, and then talking to BDC or the charter bank to get access to operating lines, term loans to increase capacity, do R&D, et cetera. But for companies that are in sectors that are harder hit, we encourage people to, and there's lots of tools and perspectives and helpful things we provide on bdc.ca to get very specific and not based on wishful thinking, but reality, kind of plan out what their cash flows are going to look like over the next weeks and months, because you want to make sure that you're able to kind of see well in advance any kind of pressure points or challenges that you're going to encounter, so that you begin to work with your partners kind of well in advance. So there is no, you're not kind of trying to solve a problem in the middle of an existential crisis. So finding a way to just kind of plan ahead with the right cash management tools so that you know exactly what to expect and can act now rather than later is a second sort of category of things we suggest to folks. But in terms of us, Nikki, it was crazy for us. We literally moved over 2,500 people. We moved almost 400 from one part of BDC to another, just a bit more capacity against the volume we were getting. And we weren't fast enough. The mix, there was no, the mix in terms of new clients versus existing clients was in line with our historical numbers. So there was no kind of bias against new clients, notwithstanding your experience. But things are back to normal now, and we're able to respond in the type of kind of fairly rapid fashion we're used to. So I would encourage folks that do think they may need some credit down the road to, again, talk to their banks, or also feel free to get back in touch with us. We're now kind of back into normal service levels and have been since about July.
Steve, very quickly, I wonder through this process, just examples of where you've seen, entrepreneurs step up. Entrepreneurs do what they do because they are entrepreneurs. They innovate. They have to, and they're used to that. Part of the concern is those that aren't to that or are pushing back against the change that is occurring. But Steve, anyone or company that you've seen that's impressed you very quickly?
I mean, I've had the luxury to talk to both, businesses that are up and businesses that are down. I mean, some of the companies that we had spoke to recently are freight companies. Local freight companies are obviously through the roof, and they've never seen, business like this in the last 5 years, and for that matter, ever in history. And they've had a tough time figuring out what's going to happen after Christmas this year. Again, that uncertainty is there. But where I'm hearing a lot from business owners right now is, and I don't think this is being talked about much, is the amount of money that they've had to spend in order to keep their business open. The money that's spent on PPE, the money that's spent on signs and shields, and labor costs are significantly up just due to cleaning. Having to sanitize everything every day, or follow people around, or etc. It's very, very exhaustive for business owners. And then on the flip side of that, people had to lay off a whole bunch of people moving into this, and now they're trying to hire them back. But that isn't going well either because of the CERB program and how that's being handled. People aren't coming back to work. So now they've turned into what we're hearing is recruitment companies. They're like, all of a sudden, we're applying to hire all of our great staff back, but they're not coming back. So now we have to hire people, and we're in a huge HR company now because we've got to recruit new people. So, training costs, become out of control again. All these new people that have to hire. And then the turnover rate is there, which people aren't talking about either, because people are like, oh, I'm going to go try to work here, but you know what, the turnover rate, I don't really like this job. So that's a concern for people, and how that's going to be handled moving forward is something. So getting back to that, we're talking about, status and strategy, and we're talking about preparation and growth. Cash flow is going to be key moving into 2021, 100%.
And Michael, I want to come back and build on Steve's comments with respect to some business trends that you're seeing. But before doing that, I do want to note and add, crisis also breeds innovation. And entrepreneurship. And just one example, and Nikki's aware, out in Lake Country, there is a couple that came back from South America. Coming back, they were Canadian entrepreneurs away. They have come back because it's a safe environment, and they have started up a company with medical grade masks, and they are in a massive growth curve. So there is this opportunity, and even in the long term, because they have the ability to provide these on an international basis and stockpile them and guarantee, because of Canada's safe status, long-term going forward, to provide security for customers on a global scale, to have these medical grade masks when the next pandemic arises. So it's fascinating to see how they've taken, and it's almost exciting to see how many entrepreneurs are out there. So I wanted to share that example. I'm not sure whether they're a BDC, but I suspect they may be a BDC client along the way. So can you talk about the business trends? Steve, start to identify that, Michael, that you're seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So the trends that we're seeing is first. And it's a kind of mix of good and bad, if you will. The first is that I think the notwithstanding significant savings that have accumulated in Canadian households for the past number of months, consumer spending is going to be constrained over the months ahead. That's kind of a dampening effect, I think, on demand. Two is, we talked about this before, I think this notion of the supply chains evolving to become more local is actually a very important opportunity. And Nikki, trend, and one thing and the third trend is what I talked about before in terms of this increased importance of e-commerce and online sales. And what's interesting is we talk to our clients, often small clients, around this. The big challenge is, and Nikki put it, how do you kind of go online? How do you deal with the fact that sales are kind of going online in a way where you don't kind of get swamped by the presence of Amazon and these big global online sellers? So kind of switching on the lights of an online capability is actually relatively straightforward. The key thing is, once you do that, how do you actually not just protect your business, but grow? And again, on bdc.ca and elsewhere, there are lots of perspectives on how to do that. And the starting point would be, how do you make sure that for all the customers and clients that you currently have in your bricks and mortar presence, when you go online, how do you continue to maintain that relationship? How do you market to them? How do you maintain their loyalties? At a minimum, your current customers kind of shift some of their buying behaviors, but they keep buying from you. And that's the big challenge. And that's what companies need to think about when they look at the challenge of succeeding online against these kind of global giants. But there's so many companies, especially in Kelowna, that are great, that have intensely loyal relationships with local customers and elsewhere, that right now are based on a kind of bricks and mortar face-to-face setting. How do you convert those? And how do you flip those so you have that type of intense loyalty, but through an online relationship combined with a face-to-face relationship? So again, the demand, the supply chain, and the online are three trends that we think are going to be with us for the next period of time.
And I want to plug to bdc.ca. There's a great library that's compiled there with lots of very helpful information. I think that's one of the other probably advice. Get used to some bedtime reading if you want to keep pace with this. And there's lots available, and the BDC website is a good example of that. Michael, I wonder if you could, I will acknowledge we've had, we look forward to seeing you back in Kelowna, by the way. We've had Pierre Cleroux, your chief economist, out a number of times. I think almost about a year ago we had or so. So we always look forward to him and his forecast for the future. Forecasting during a pandemic, I suspect a little bit more challenging. But where do you see the economy and recovery going? Obviously, particularly we're interested in the Kelowna context, but the rest of Canada, what should business owners expect moving forward?
Well, it's so for BC now, and I don't have actually I apologize, kind of granular data on Kelowna, but for BC, again, the numbers I have, if you've recovered about 76% of the jobs that have been lost since March and April, which is kind of in line with the national average. Your unemployment rate's about 8.4, which is slightly better than the national average. So again, the way we see things evolving is that BC's evolution seems to be kind of in line with Canada. And again, there are, as we all know, kind of tons of variables at play. Most notably is the state of the public health situation. But again, we see a fair amount of economic uncertainty for the period ahead. We see some sectors that I described already doing well, others not. But overall, we don't see Canada getting back to its, say, February 2020 GDP levels until sometime mid to late 22, early 23. So it's going to be a slow recovery in the years ahead. And again, there'll be a number of sectors that, frankly, will take longer to recover than others.
I want to build on this, and I'm not sure if you have a comment or have had experience, and it relates to major centers versus growing centers like the Okanagan. And we were certainly on a growth path. When you look at our employment numbers, actually on a recovery, we're doing better. When you look at Vancouver, and the greater Vancouver area was such a large economy, the impact is huge as a comparative. The question is, because of the pandemic and whether this would be a trend, is investment likely to look at those secondary growth areas like a region like the Okanagan, or is it just a matter of time, and will those major metro centers that are such a hub of activity, whether it's Greater Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, does the recovery accelerate back for those, or will there be a shift or a trend to consider maybe those secondary growth areas because of we prepare for the potential next pandemic? Is this an opportunity, do you think, for those areas like the Okanagan that was on a growth curve?
Well, it's a good question. I don't actually have any facts and figures to turn to on that. But what you do see though is again, investment levels do link to kind of population, and insofar as and construction's a big driver, especially in British Columbia, of the GDP. So insofar as people will continue to move and set up shop and work in places like Kelowna, which are great to live, I would anticipate economic growth coming from that. And you do read a lot now. Anyway, it's early days about a bit of an exodus out of inner city cores towards either suburbs or different areas. So you may find a bit of a disconnect between kind of rates of growth in downtown cores of the kind of largest urban areas from growth in places like Kelowna and others, which are kind of very, very desirable places to live and work.
Yeah, there will be.
I'm just hypothesizing though.
Yeah, and I suspect there will be, well, if there's not already, research being undertaken by academic institutions like UBCO, that's UBC, though it has such a presence here, of looking at the long-term impact, but I won't prognosticate in those particular areas, and I'm sensitive to time. I wonder, Michael, if you could, what's your number one advice that you give business owners that are tuning in, watching, and listening to us today?
Well, the one piece of advice, which most entrepreneurs don't need hearing, but it's a good reminder, is just to stay resilient. And it's amazing how much resilience that we've seen since March, because it's been unbelievable what so many entrepreneurs have had to go through. As Nikki described, the kind of panic of what happened back in March, to the steady drumbeat of actually very, very bad news over the course of the early summer, to a sense the economy is kind of picking up, and now the public health issues that we're certainly seized of here in Quebec. It's been an unbelievable roller coaster, and just being resilient, being positive, having a kind of future-looking mindset is what's always fueled Canadian entrepreneurs, and it's what's made us successful. And I just encourage people to kind of keep at it, keep thinking that way. And kind of recognize that we're kind of moving out of this kind of inch by inch, and we'll make it.
So, Dan, you're on mute there, Dan.
Thank you. Good reminder. To build on that, Steve, Nikki, just sensitive to our time and the time that we have with Michael, any additional thoughts or queries that you might have, questions before we wrap things up with Michael?
Other than that, Kelowna as a whole is experiencing, rapid discovery. I mean, we're always being discovered, but I find right now COVID has definitely, elevated that across. We're getting domestic inquiries like we've never seen before from across the nation, whether it's Ontario or Manitoba, Alberta, the Lower Mainland, and people are looking. For a way to get here. They're looking at businesses, they're looking at commercial property. And so, the secondary city of Kelowna versus the metro is expediting at inquiries like we've never seen before.
And Dan, I think just the two quick comments that I'd make to Michael's comments on companies that have transitioned over to e-commerce. When operations shut down or they were closed by choice, they shifted over to e-commerce. They grew that side of their business. They kept that. And when they reopened, they got the loyal customers back. So it was net positive on their financials and their business. So that was good. And to your point, Steve, the transfer of talent coming from Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver into Kelowna is enormous. And people, we're seeing groups of we're seeing departments break out of large corporate organizations and relocate to Kelowna, bringing their small teams. So looking at things in smaller groups. So the talent coming into our local market is obvious, and it's exciting. They want to live, work, and play here.
Right. And we've proven to ourselves that we can work remotely. So again, you're going to work remotely. You may as well do it from Kelowna, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know what, Nikki, I've experienced that firsthand. I've had to hire some people this summer, and the resumes and the selection of people that we got from across the country just blew my mind away of you know, hey, you know what, I want to, and from the large corporations that want to come here and people that want to be here, I had no idea.
So Michael, do you have time for two quick ones?
Please.
Okay, we have a question that came in, and I'm reminded that now our reach is a little bit, so we have people from throughout the region that have joined us, including from north of us in a very small community called Enderby. Not sure if you've been to Enderby, Michael, but just outside of Vernon, as you go north on Highway 97, you might have traveled close to Enderby. But they're saying, you know, small rural communities have been extremely hard hit. So any advice that you would give them? How do they move forward in this context and the change? Is there an opportunity on the online there? Would that be advice? I'm assuming you also have clients, and not just in the major metropolitan areas, but you likely have clients in some very small communities across the country, right?
No, we do. We definitely do. And yes, as we've been discussing, again, the first thing that I would suggest every company do, and I assume the individual asking the question's done this, is just take advantage of all the government programming, because it does buy you time through these grants and through these interest-free or low-interest loans, and make sure you take full advantage of all of that. And then at the same time, there are the online opportunities that were described. And again, it depends on the business. But insofar as consumer habits are now changing towards buying online, it does put kind of different companies in play for specific buying decisions. So it is something that's definitely worth looking at as to become more demand challenged in your region. But I do worry, you know, a little bit about the effect of this pandemic on entrepreneurs in regions. And also a lot of entrepreneurs just in general have had difficulties accessing the financial system. Women entrepreneurs to a certain extent, Black entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. And one thing that we're keeping a careful eye on is the extent to which those trends get worsened during the pandemic, because as Canadians, we can't let that happen. And we need to make sure that all entrepreneurs, regardless of demographic, age, location, get access to what they need to build great businesses.
You know, and I'm sensitive to time, Michael. It's been such an interesting conversation to have you. I wish we could keep you a lot longer and continue the conversation. But one of the things that was raised, interestingly enough, at an all candidates forum that we hosted yesterday was, because the aviation sector has been so hard hit, that there is actually a reverse brain drain, that some of those that were developing, particularly we're not quite at a cluster here, but have the makings for a cluster development for aerospace in the Okanagan. Are you hearing in some of those sectors that we should be concerned about a potential brain drain the other way, that we'll lose some of the entrepreneurs in some of those sectors that have been hard hit? Is that finding, or have you done any research, your team, on that?
You know, I think it's a good hypothesis to have. I think if these sectors aren't supported, and if these sectors don't thrive, the whole ecosystem around them will lose its raison d'etre, and will disappear, move, what have you. So I do think that especially for airlines, tourism, etc., sectors that we all know are kind of hard hit through no fault of the entrepreneurs involved, I think there is a need for us collectively to find a way. This is a BDC issue, but collectively to kind of do more, because demand is just not coming back quickly, especially for airlines.
Yeah, and it was interesting, as Canadians, we tend to be very gracious and quiet, and think, well, we're also a safe environment. We trade, we're a good trading partner. We also have to be careful, because we might lose some of the talent and not addressing those downturn. And it was a good reminder for us. So thank you very much for taking that in the comments. Just to wrap it up, Michael, any final comments from BDC as Small Business Week, access to resources that you'd plug before we wrap things up?
No, I just want to thank everybody for the time and interest. Please stay in touch. Again, Steve North and Ryan McLean are part of our local team. Contact them. There's lots available on bdc.ca. We're here to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us.
And Steve, just to wrap things up.
Yeah, wow. It's my pleasure to acknowledge and thank Michael for joining us today. Michael, thank you for providing your insights and perspectives in this presentation to our Kelowna audience and entrepreneurs. The information is absolutely invaluable. I can say it's particularly engaging and great advice as an entrepreneur. From you saying, staying resilient and watch the cash flow. Always a good reminder for entrepreneurs. So, on behalf of the Kelowna Chamber and all those who have joined us online today, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. Some time ago, the Chamber shifted from providing a speaker gift, and instead we'll be providing a small donation to a local charity on your behalf. And this month's benefactor is going to be the Commissioners of BC. So again, thank you very much again. And Dan, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks very much, Michael, again, for joining us. Thanks, Steve, for those comments to wrap it up, and Nikki as well for joining us for a very interesting conversation. We look forward to potentially having you back, Michael, and if you do get out, we'll share that bottle of wine because we like to give those that come and visit. Unfortunately, you're not here, you're in Montreal, so I think we're going to split up the wine among us at this end. So I do want to acknowledge we did have a couple of last minute questions that came in. We will follow up. If you have any other questions too, we certainly have contacts locally with BDC. We can help navigate that. So if we didn't get to your question, just contact the Chamber here in Kelowna, contact myself or any of our team, and we'll be ensured to follow up to help you. We know that there's even startup companies that are just getting going. Interesting time to look at a startup. So if we can be helpful making some connections with either accountants or the great team at BDC, we look forward to that as well. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to Steve and Nikki for joining us. We are going to wrap things up. I do need to acknowledge a few folks that have made our gatherings like this possible, including our President's Circle members here at the Chamber. They invest so that we can do sessions like this to provide more information to small businesses and help them along the way. That includes Interior Savings, UBC Okanagan, MMP, Rogers Communication that has joined us recently as the President's Circle member, and our longtime President's Circle BDO. We couldn't do what we do without their support, so we thank them very much. Also want to acknowledge if you are a startup and you're looking at keeping and recruiting strong employees, you might want to consider the #1 employee health benefit plan in the country. It's the Chamber's plan. You can contact the Chamber office or TD Benefits to help you navigate those waters. You can take a look at the opportunities to provide extended healthcare benefits to your team. And as we mentioned, BDC has a lot of information available on their website. We have linkages to that on ours. This is available, a coalition of all chambers through the Okanagan Valley. Under Okanagan, we've got this. You can find it online, a wealth of stories of resilience and success as we celebrate those that are in that. And there's lots of resources available, including linkages to all the government programs that are available. And to plug what's upcoming, we have our speaker series online. We do this monthly, and we're talking about if you're in the business of trying to build your team, particularly if you're involved in human resources, an untapped labor market, elevating your business through inclusive business practices, increasing diversity, even looking in one of the trends I think we're going to see because of aging demographics is people working longer. So how do you create a more inclusive environment to allow those that are getting a little longer on the face of the planet to stay longer in the workforce? It's a reality that we're going to face. So I look forward to joining us Tuesday, October 27th. For that one, you can register online. There is no cost if you just want to sit in. It'll be a very informative session. One of the things that we've done here, we work with the BC Chamber to develop a program entitled Business Resilience. If you have some employees that aren't real busy, you want to bring them back and increase their knowledge capacity to position yourself and your organization and them for greater success post-pandemic. We have 3 cohorts we're working. It's an online session to give you some business tools to accelerate your success. If you're a member of the Chamber, it's a 50% discount. If you want more information on this and how to participate, just contact the Chamber. We appreciate the support from the BC Chamber that has put this together, and it is available to non-members as well. And also just a quick plug on our Business Excellence Awards. scheduled for November 26th. It's going to be an exciting online event. It'll be a show, not quite like the Grammys, but we're targeting at about that level, working on the house band now for the event, and we'll have a few surprises. We want to thank Ferris, LLP, and Interior Savings as our title sponsor. And normally, Michael, thanks for hanging in. We do these at the start of our session, only because when we do it at the end, and in fact, that's been the case, 10 people left. They said, I'm not going to listen to some of that. So I do want to thank all those that have joined us and Michael for hanging in. I want to wish you all well. And as I mentioned before, be as positive as you can. Look at the great entrepreneurs that we have in this community and celebrate what they're doing and recognize them. Be calm, be kind, and support local. Show local some love, particularly during, should do it all the time, but during Small Business Week. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.